Hello. Oh, we can't access my non-enable excellent videos. Wait, no, a second. Let's see. Are we recording now? Is it working now, Gaden? Okay, perfect. They can edit this part out. Anyway. Well, hello and welcome back to Senior Housing Her Stories, a podcast dedicated to sharing the origin stories of women working throughout senior housing. A way for us to help connect with other women who are either currently working within the industry, whether at a community or in some type of supportive service, or women looking to enter into our industry. And today we have a very special guest.
Oh my gosh, thank
Dixon.
you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining. I just, it's funny, I think, how this kind of came about. I mean, obviously, I've known you a really, really long time, but just recently running into you at the Brain Conference and being like, hey, would you mind taking your picture? I was like, yeah, of course I'll take your picture. And then we start like talking, and then I was like, oh my gosh, we totally know each other, and you helped me in one of my communities. So if you don't mind just telling our listeners, kind of who you are,
I'd be happy
and
to.
Just to start, like, what you're currently doing.
So where to begin? Well, I've been in senior living for, this year coming up, it's going to be 16 years, which is crazy. And I started senior living. I was living in Pennsylvania. I started with a family-owned, family-managed company that I can't say enough great things about, Country Meadows Retirement Communities in Pennsylvania. It's where I got my start, my career. And over the past almost 16 years, I've served in every role in sales. I've worked on the operating side, on the consulting side, leading a consulting organization. I've worked on the tech side, and it was January of 2020 that I decided it was time for me to start my own sales training and coaching organization, which led me to where I am now, which is the founder of JD Solutions Group. So that's me in the fastest nutshell ever.
I love it. Yeah, no, listen, hey, as a business owner myself and starting a company, particularly I did it with my family, obviously, but I completely understand, where you're at. And, and I think that a lot of other women are going to love to hear your story and to give them a little bit of inspiration to say, hey, if she could do that, so could I. So before we dive into a little bit more of like your origin, and I really want to hear, some of the stuff about your experience working directly at a building and how you got into that. But before we do that, one question. So if you were to say, what are you known for people as the go-to for? Like, what do people go to you about? Like, what are you, what's your expertise
sitting right
now?
It's
today
my
sitting in your
role
chair,
is as a coach. I think that when I first started in consulting, maybe like 11, 12 years ago, I thought my job was to have the answers. I was supposed to have the answers. I was supposed to have them right away, and I was supposed to come in with the answers. And what I learned very quickly is it had nothing to do with that. My role is as a coach to investors, to CEOs, to COOs, to community relations directors. And I think people come to me when they do have problems, they have challenges, and they want to find a way through it. And so whether it's a marketing challenge, an occupancy challenge, a business challenge, that's why people come to me. And that's what I've really noticed. And it's what I love. Above everything else, coaching is something that means a lot to me.
And it takes a special skill set to be a coach, right? So being able to come in with that clear mind and get everybody to kind of calm down or get everybody to like motivate and then also, I think, one of the really important roles of a coach is execution, right? So because anybody can be handed a playbook, but being able to help people navigate how to get the win, block and tackle, but also score, I think is a really important role
and
as a
it's
coach
certainly not
particularly
easy.
as leaders.
I'd always been passionate about, helping, how do you help people be the best as themselves versus, we don't want to turn in the sales realm. The worst thing that we can do is try and turn salespeople into carbon copies of ourselves or of something else. Salespeople, man, they have tough jobs. They've got to think critically. They've got to think on their feet. And that means being able to get in touch with some of the things that are more challenging and a lot deeper. So that's hands down favorite part of the role.
I love it. So, okay, so understanding that where you are today is in this, that your expertise is being a coach and helping people navigate through their problems. So take us back a little bit to your origin and, what helped you get here. So how did you get this job at Country Meadows in Pennsylvania? Like, did you just apply for it? Did you know somebody? Did you grow up saying,
no,
I
knew nothing about senior living. So I didn't know anything about it at all. And it was funny. It was my mom. My mom was working in senior living. She had a long career in direct selling, and she was consulting for a senior living company. And she kept saying to me, Jennifer, you need to check out this industry. And I was like, no, Mom, that sounds terrible. No, I'm not going to be a good fit for that. It was just like I didn't know anything about it. And I went once to visit my mom at one of the communities she was working at, and I was just stunned by all the residents. They knew who I was. I'd never been there before, but they knew everything about like my mom and her life. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this world? And I just happened to see that Country Meadows had a job posted. I think it was actually, they have a not-for-profit ecumenical community, and I applied for a sales job. And I remember it was so funny when I applied for it. They were a little hesitant. They'll probably kill me for joking about this, but they were hesitant because I didn't have senior living sales experience. almost 16 years ago.
So how long ago was this? This was like, you said like 16 years ago?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So you were like how old?
You were like 10 now. So I was in like, so it was a while ago.
You're younger than me,
sure.
So don't knock it.
I guess I was, was I in my late 20s? I guess the math. No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Just out of
I was
college?
probably maybe
kind of
like 28 years old when I started in senior living, but I had already had a significant amount of sales experience. So I had worked for companies like Avon Products. I had worked for the American Cancer Society. I had a lot of significant sales experience, and senior living was just, it was brand new to me. And I just completely fell in love with it. There was so much. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When she listens to this, she's going to be
really
like,
the reason though.
Check. And yeah. Well, and if you think of like, this is all about
like
origin stories. If you go back even further, I mean, so I grew up like in the family that I grew up in. So, and this will be kind of interesting. So my mom worked in direct selling, but my mom worked for a lingerie direct selling company. Yeah. Very spicy. So when I look back on this right now, and I look at growing up in central Pennsylvania in a very conservative area, and what my mom did was essentially, building a business and doing that, I'm like, wow, like that was wild. But as a kid, you're like, oh God, Mom, can you like do something more normal? Please. But there's so much that was formative about that, because I would sit and I would listen to her on the phone, and I would listen to her coach people on how to sell. And then, she grew, it was crazy. It was just crazy. So there is a lot when I kind of look back Jennifer. On my life of what I learned and what I learned about sales at a very, very early age that, interestingly, led me to senior living. That is not what I went to school for. So then did you study sales? At all. Like in school? Is that what you went to school for? So again, remember, like growing up, I did not want to be in sales. There was nothing, I wanted nothing to do with it. But I grew up with it. I loved it. I was part of it all the time. But I was like, no, what I wanted to do more than anything was I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to learn to speak like every language ever. And I don't know what, I didn't really have like an end game for that. So I had like, I had like a dual major in like German and Spanish, and that's what I was going to do. And it for lots of reasons, that didn't end up working out the way that I planned. And I'm thankful for that. But no, I had no formal training in sales.
That's hilarious. So so your mom tells you need to go check this place out, and everybody knows your mom, and your mom is like this completely like amazing, kicking ass salesperson in such a sexy industry, like literally sexy industry. And so then the kicker that got you was when, Country Meadows was hesitant to hire you because you had no experience. But what do you think really kind of shone through?
I think that first of all,
to help you get that
they
job,
were willing to give me a chance. I think that was the big piece. And they were willing to give me a chance so that way I could actually show them that I was committed to it. And I think that's really what did it. So I'm definitely very tenacious in that sense. And I really, I don't want to say like I fought, but I really did. I really wanted the job. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I can do this. And they were amazing to me. I worked with them for almost 5 years, and learned just all of the fundamentals and everything about senior living. So it was really one of the most formative experiences that I call on, because they did so many things well, and I'm glad they took a chance on me even though I didn't have senior living experience.
I think we now as an industry, obviously this is like you said, 16, almost 20 years later. I mean, it's kind of a common practice for us to even look for people now that are coming to us without, some experience. But our industry is still relatively young. We're only a few decades old, in all actuality. So it's kind of interesting to look for us to say that we're looking back and that we've been in the industry that long. So how long were you there at Country Meadows before, and then where did you kind of move over to? Like, at what point did you start feeling you had your footing, that you were confident enough to start,
it's
grabbing onto that ladder?
I was there for almost 5 years. And it was towards the end of my tenure there that my son was born. And I think that's what really started to change things for me. And it changed things in a way that I was in a job and a company that I loved. But when you are a mom and you have a career, and, my husband and I we were stunned at the cost of daycare and what it cost. And I had a great salary. I was making great bonuses and commission. My husband had a great job, and we could barely make ends meet because of that. And so there was that kind of component where you are really, I think, as a woman and a mom, realizing the impact of childcare and what that means. So there was that side of it. And then there was also, I remember I was sitting at my desk one day and an email came across, and it was Tracy Bild's daily sales memo, or she may have called them like daily sales vitamins at the time. And I remember reading it, and she said something that was probably like very like over the top, as Tracy does, but very like on point. And I was like, what is this? And who is this? And what is she saying? And had the opportunity to be able to meet her, and I just knew instantly. I mean, so I was in a great job, great company. My son's 4 months old, maybe. And I said to my husband, I was like, I want to do this. And it was at a time when her company, this is years and years ago, like they weren't salaried positions. There were no benefits. There was no insurance. It was, if you join our team, you need to be able to win the trust of our clients. You need to be able to do a great job, and you will be able to do what you need to do. But it was a leap of faith, And to me, that was a very much a defining moment in my career, to leave people who I knew and loved and a company that I trusted, to take a risk, because for me, I felt like I could do it. And it was also what I needed to do for our family.
I have literal goosebumps. I mean, that was like a serious leap of faith. And having, I'm a mom myself, like I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So to think about making those types of risks, with a 4-month-old, I mean, that was some real gutsy stuff to do, so I'd like to dive into this one a little bit more, because I feel like that is such a telling tale. And I don't think a lot of women, a lot of times, especially in that position, would feel that they could take that risk. Like, what do you feel like, other than like it was just your gut telling you, that you just felt like you could do it? Tell us, like, what were you afraid of, or what just
there were
got you
probably
past
many,
any of
many
those
things
fears?
to be afraid of, but I was most afraid of what would happen if I didn't do it. And I looked back and said, man, I wish I would have done that. I mean, I feel like that's always one of my biggest fears in life, and what sometimes causes me, for better or for worse, to, jump off the mountain, or, kind of take those leaps of faith, because I just thought, if I don't do this, what kind of an example am I setting, for my son? And then, several years later, I'd had my daughter, and I just thought, I just felt very passionately about it. I knew that I didn't want to regret not doing it. And in terms of feeling comfortable, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky. My husband, Brett, is huge. And he was a huge support, huge advocate. Not at first. Like when you come home and you say to your husband, so, hey, I am, and I think he'll be so mad, because he says I told him after the fact, after I, gave my resignation. He said, so you're gonna leave your job. You love your job. It's great. You've got wonderful benefits. You have all these great things, and you want to leave for a job where you don't necessarily know what you're going to be doing. You don't know how much money you're going to make, and you don't know what's going to happen. And I was like, that's it. That's it right there. That's it. So, and I think that's been, it's been a theme for me throughout my career, that I've been willing to take risks. And I've been willing to try things. And I think that's what you have to do to get out of, really get out of that. If you want to get out of your comfort zone and you want to grow, you have to do that.
And I love that you brought up the position that your husband took, because I think it's a very funny dichotomy that we as women, in our careers, we always take into consideration, our husband and how it's going to impact them. Yeah. And it's not always the case when the man is making those decisions, in terms of like making that risk or making that change. And I love that you did that and showed your it was your son, right, at a very early age. Hey, like, this is what mom's all about. And, and this is how it's going to go. And like, obviously, your husband got on board to be supportive, but, So tell us, so then you go over to Tracy Build, and I love Tracy. She's a good personal friend of mine too, and we've used, as you know, her programs and systems from the onset of our own company. So what was it like once you got there? I mean, did you second guess yourself, or did you just kind of take to it like a duck to water?
I'm this balance of two things where I do have a lot of confidence. I do just dive in, but I'm also like my own worst critic, where you're always just like, did I do that right? Could I have done that better? And I think that's part of, what pushes me a lot. So I took to it and I dove in. I set a plan. I set a plan for myself. I set my financial goals. I knew what I wanted to do, and I worked really hard. And I had to do a lot of listening, a lot of learning. I served in, when I kind of look at my roles in that particular organization, I started out as a coach. And you can't be a coach until you prove you can be a coach. And you can't be a trainer until you've been a great coach. And you can't be an on-site specialist. So you had to kind of, I arced this path from a person who had, never been on a coaching call or led one before to eventually becoming the chief operating officer at the company, almost 5 years later. So again, another great experience that allowed me to understand operators and investors, work with them all across the U.S., and to experience in that role, like every single role in that I took was challenging in its own way. So you learn so much when you do that. I won't say it's easy because I don't think it's easy, but when you're doing something that feels right, it makes it easier to take those risks and try those things that are different or out of your comfort zone.
So for our listeners, to help them understand, like, give me an example or give us an example of when you said, because I really like the way you said that when you're doing something that feels right. I think as women, we have a tendency to second guess our gut. Like, we'll say, like, I feel like that's my gut telling me don't do this or do this. And then I feel like we get very stuck in our heads. Women in particular. Men don't generally always second guess themselves as much like we do. So what was it that was making you feel like, hey, this feels right. I'm in my right place. I'm doing the right thing. I'm not going to look back.
Even beyond my time at Build. If I was just to look throughout my career, I can give you example over example of times when I was told that I wasn't good enough or I wasn't ready, either externally or internally. When I got my first store manager position when I was 18 years old in retail, I remember my boss said to me, she said, "You're not ready for this. You're 18 years old. You don't know what you're doing. And honestly, I don't really want you here." It was somebody above her who had said, you need to take this person. She needs to do this. I can remember when I came into my first role as a divisional that was in, kind of more in retail. And I was like 23, 24 years old. And I remember the person mentoring me said to me, "You're too young. You are too young to be sitting here. You're not ready." And I remember being in my 30s and really wanting to be a part of the senior leadership team. And I remember a man saying to me, "Everyone on this team is in their 50s. What makes you think that you have earned the right to be here?" And so I say all those things because I also know what's going to happen when I'm in my 50s. I'm going to be too old and I'm going to be too experienced, right? So it's this line of BS that we feed ourselves and that we allow other people to feed us, that we're not ready, we're not this, we're not that. Like, how do you think people get experience? How do you think? By trying. So I think that has... And what I would say for all of those negative things, there have been 10, 20, 50 positive things. But I remember those things because I know that there's a lot of women who hear that or experience that or sitting at home and being like, "I've got 2 kids and I'm not sure I'm ready to be a regional. I'm not sure I'm ready to be a VP." And it's, when are you going to be ready? You're ready now. So I think those are the things that we have to begin changing the story that we tell ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all heard that, right? I mean, and at the and that's why I said, like, at the worst case scenario, like, what are you going to lose? You can always go back, right, if it doesn't work out. And I know people who have done that and said, "I wasn't ready. It's too much travel, or it's too much pressure," and gone back to work at a community. And there's nothing wrong with that,
That's what's important.
There's nothing wrong
What
with
do you
that.
value?
Absolutely.
And if you can learn and figure that out, it'll help guide everything else in your life.
%. So one of the things I love about women in particular, we wear so many different hats, right? Like, so between being a mom and a mother, building a career, building a business, taking those extra leaps. So then what was the next piece that, like, gave you that confidence to say, "Hey, I've gone as high as I can here, and now I want to just do this for, myself"?
For a long time, it was just kind of like, I would call it like this, I don't want to say nagging, but this quiet voice in the back of my head that was telling me, kind of telling me to do this. And I had been kind of talking back to that voice and pretty much telling myself, you need to be this first. Like, you need to be a chief sales officer first. You need to be a VP of sales first. I was making essentially all of these different excuses and reasons for why I couldn't do it. And I had to ask myself, why was that? And, some of it came from fear of the unknown and fear of starting a business. I didn't have, when I started JD Solutions, it was January 2020, the end of January. I had maybe less than $10,000 in my savings, no investors, nothing. I mean, I had an idea, like no clients, nothing. I had absolutely nothing. And within 60 days of that, a global pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And, so it was just like all of these things happened. And what I think what kind of was guiding me and what I was keeping my eye on was the vision of what I had in mind. I had found myself prior to that on airplanes, sitting there, away from my family for weeks and weeks, not seeing my husband, my kids, not really knowing what was going on with, like, having no friends, no life. And I think at one point I was like, well, why am I doing this? Why don't I build something that works for me, works for my family, and lets me focus on the things that I love the most? And I wanted to be able to make an impact. So it was kind of like, it wasn't like one moment. It was just like all these moments just adding up and just kind of all of it coming together. And I just really envisioned what it was that I wanted. And even though there were so many crazy things in 2020 that came my way, I just kind of kept my eye on where I was going. And that's what helped focus me through the really tough times.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because that was a tough time to start. Like, trust me, I totally understand. And I give you so much props and kudos. And that's why when I ran into you, I was like, oh, we got to tell your story. Like, this is a great story. And, like, just so much, like, grit and determination. And you just talk through it like it was so simple and logical for you.
What I would want to share, though, is, like, it's so easy 100%. On a podcast to share, like, the highlights reel or, kind of, like, I feel like these are, like, really good things to talk about. But I think the fact of the matter is they're tough. I mean, they're tough decisions. There are tough points in your life where you have to make hard decisions, and they're not easy at the time at all. And there's so much of the process that is emotional. I mean, I had spent years working with and for founders, and how do I take the voice of the founder and how do I bring that out and communicate that? And I found myself when I had my own company being like, well, what's my voice? What do I have to say? I'm not in that warm, safe place of someone else. Someone else has done all the hard work of creating their brand and I'm bringing it out. No, now I have to build something myself, and I better be confident in what it is, and I better know who I am. And that, I'm most thankful for that, because that's been the hardest part, to be able to come to be comfortable with yourself.
Mm-hmm. So this leads me to my last question that I like to end the podcast on is, in specifically saying, like, knowing yourself. So as a woman, if you were to say you had a superpower,
oh my gosh,
what do you think?
Oh boy,
superpower
that is a good one. So what's my superpower? I know that there's some resiliency in there, but that's not my superpower. I guess I don't know. My superpower is probably that I can always see the good, and I can see the way through in everything. I think that's my superpower, and it comes across when I work with my clients, because I've got to help them see the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's also my superpower for me too, that I can be in the worst mindset and I can find my way through to where I want to be. So I think that's my superpower. It's a tough question.
Yeah, I think you have supervision. You have super positive vision. Your superpower is super positivity vision, super positive vision. And I couldn't, like, honestly, I heard it the entire time, and I know our listeners are just going to 100% hear it. It shines through. That's what I was saying, like, in hearing your story of, going from this to this to this to then starting your business during, a pandemic, specifically impacting senior housing industry, like not able to get into buildings, like directly impacting and, occupancy and move-ins, which is what you're really like focused on, creating.
Right.
And it wasn't like, it was like, oh, well, we can overcome this. No, like the state will literally not allow us to move people in. I mean, talk about seeing, like clairvoyantly seeing through, that, difficulty and roadblock to saying, nope, I'm going to stay the course and I am going to see this through because, you truly listen to your gut
sure is.
And listen to that inner voice inside your head is a good one there, Jennifer. So amazing.
I know. I
amazing.
agree.
Well, I cannot thank you. I feel like we could have talked for 2 hours about this. That just literally flew. But I can't thank you enough for one, sharing your story, for two, sharing even the difficult pieces of it and being real, and as well as your dedication to our industry and helping to support all of our teams that are out there and our seniors,
Sevy,
and helping
thank you
them
for
make
doing
that decision
this,
to come into our community.
I'm so excited.
I appreciate
for
you,
this
Jennifer.
message,
thank you so much.
And for all of your future guests. I'm just so excited for people in the industry and for women to hear this and continue to hear it. So thank you for creating this kind of platform, this kind of place where people can talk openly. I think that's tremendous. So thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor. Me too.
So many women are going to love this episode. I'm really excited about it. So you are welcome. Thank you for being a guest. Mwah.